I'm going to invite our panelists to join us in just a second. But before I do that, I want to invite up a good friend and colleague, Dr. Johnson, from the AFT to say a few remarks. Again, everybody should know they're in the right room. This is the Educators Luncheon. In particular, we're going to have a conversation under the banner of Congresswoman Wilson's Scholars Think Tank. But right now, give one of our partners, Dr. Johnson, representing AFT, a beautiful round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon, educators and friends. This conference is leading policy conference on issues affecting communities and our families and our students and the global Black community. So I welcome you to the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Annual Legislative Conference. For more than 2 decades, I should say, the American Federation of Teachers have been committed to work at the Congressional Black Caucus. We have partners with the CBC in Washington and throughout the country to push forward measures that would level the playing field for African American students and workers. And the CBC's role in the passage of the Every Student Succeed Act was critical to ensuring equity, justice, and fairness to the community of color and the United States as a whole. 3 years ago, the CBC, NEA, and the AFT decided to take our relationship one step further. We launched a professional development series that would not only expand the conference offering, but empower and equip educators with the resources necessary to respond to the issues facing our community, the educational equity, poverty, and the criminal justice reform. So this year is no different. During the next couple of days, you will be equipped with resources and information about the ESSA and cultural competence, as well as tools you can take back to your classrooms and schools to support our students. Our students and their families deserve the best education possible. We will keep calling on Washington, our state capitals, and our city halls to support strong public schools. But we are not going to wait for them. We are the change that we seek. And that means we must burn the midnight oil, fight forward for our students and their families, and our communities and this nation. We as educators must get informed about the issues and policy impacting our community and be the advocates for our change. Our communities are depending on us, not only to vote in the upcoming election, but to educate others about how much is at stake in this election. Brothers and sisters, our fight forward won't be as easy a one, but honestly, which fight has ever been easy for us? So I urge you all to enjoy the weekend, soak up as much knowledge as possible, and thank you so much for being here. And let's get informed, empowered, and power charged to fight ahead. Thank you for your involvement.
So I would like to invite up our panelists who are going to help frame a conversation. Everybody say conversation. For us, they are not going to talk to us, but we're going to talk to each other. So give them a round of applause as they make their way to the stage. First is going to be Dr. Alberto Carvalho, followed by Ms. Carla Hernandez-Matz, and then Mr. Frederick Ingram. And as they take their seats, I'm going to ask all of y'all to put your forks down, put the knife down. I know the food is real good. Some of y'all carry hot sauce with your bag swag, so it's tasting good. And ask everybody to please stand up for a second. We are going to give proper acknowledgement to our Congresswoman, Frederica Wilson, who every day fights battles on behalf of our children, on behalf of each of you, in our communities. Many of you know, especially the Miami-Dade contingency, all that she does, not only for the state of Florida, but for our country generally. A lot of her work around founding the 5,000 Role Models program, of which I'm a proud member. I don't have on my tie, but I'm a member. Tell my brothers I represented for them today. Has been acknowledged by our president. And again, she thought it important. She has votes. She has a ton of commitment. She has a huge brain trust that she's producing. But really wanted to make sure that there was a space for you, for educators today, to talk, to vent, to be able to have a candid discussion. So please, again, join me in saying thank you to her very publicly for all she does. And she always look good when she do it too, y'all.
Thank you so much. Just let me say thank you. Thank you for participating in this forum. And we wanted to convene this luncheon, and we hope you will engage this panel in the conversation. Everywhere I go, I meet teachers, and they always have something that they want to talk about and vent about what's happening in schools. And I understand that because I was a teacher. So I understand that you need that opportunity. You need to be able to open up. And so I brought to you the Superintendent of the Year forever in my mind. My own superintendent from Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and the leaders of the United Teachers of Dade, and now the leader of the Florida Education Association. And this young man comes directly from the White House. So if you want to have someone to dialogue with, these are the right people. Tell them your issues. Talk about high-stakes testing. Talk about discipline. Talk about how everyone expects teachers and schools to solve every community issue, from obesity to mental illness. Everything is dumped in the schools, and you must solve those problems. So talk about it today, and let them give you some answers. You're going to see me tip out to go back to the Capitol because we're still in session, and I have to vote. And those of you who are from Miami, you know what's going on with Zika. But all of you who have come from across these United States to this forum, thank you. Thank you to the AFT, thank you to the FEA, thank you to the White House, thank you to the NEA, thank you to Miami-Dade County Public Schools. God bless all of you. Thank you.
So you all heard the charge. I'm just here to facilitate. Yes, sir, I'll take that in 2 seconds. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read their bios, not all of it, but for the unfamiliar, those who do not have the pleasure of living in sunny Southern Florida, I want you to know a bit about the context of the leaders who will frame what are we doing? We're having a There we go. They're going to frame our conversation, and then I'm going to take that handheld mic and do my best Oprah impersonation to try and facilitate the discussion. Also want to point out that there are some additional experts in the room. Deputy Assistant Secretary Tanya Clay House, my colleague Charlie, are still here. And then there are also experts that manage policies for the NEA and the AFT. I saw Kim, Merwin, Latoya, and others in the room as well. So just want to acknowledge that while there are three leaders and experts on the dais, that there are a number of you in the audience who have expertise as well. So this should be as expansive as possible. Does everybody understand what we are going to accomplish in the time that we have before 2 o'clock? Everybody okay with it? Anybody in the wrong place? All right, just making sure. So seated directly to my left, many of you know him, is Dr. Alberto Carvalho, who has served as the superintendent of the Miami-Dade County Public Schools for quite some time as the nation's 4th largest school district. And he's served in this capacity since September 2008. He is a nationally recognized expert on education transformation, finance, and leadership development. Among the things that I think are really important to note in his distinguished career, he is a proud founder and self-appointed principal of the award-winning iPrep Academy, which has become a model of robust 21st century learning in the age of technology and innovation. And so we'll ask him to talk a bit about that. Give him a round of applause. Seated next to him is Mrs. Carla Hernandez Motz. Did I get that last name right? Perfect. She's a first-generation American of Honduran descent, born and raised in Miami. She is the first Hispanic officer to be elected to the United Teachers of Days, the largest labor union in the Southeast U.S. She served a 3-year term as Secretary-Treasurer starting in 2010 and then was elected president in February. She has a bachelor's degree from FIU in emotionally handicapped education, which is something that I know has come up in a lot of the workshops, and is a staunch advocate for public education. The thing that I'm most drawn to in her bio is that she's happily married and is a mother of 2 brilliant babies, and her goal as a leader is to have a profound impact upon education policy and ensure a solid foundation for all children attending Miami-Dade County Public Schools. Give her a round of applause. Last but certainly not least is our brother, Mr. Frederick Ingram. He is the vice president for the Florida Education Association, and he is the organization's first minority officer in that capacity. Give him a round of applause for that. Many of you know that FEA represents nearly 150,000 union members from the Florida Keys to the Panhandle of Florida, so lots of area and lots of diversity within that. For those who do not know, Brother Ingram is also an accomplished teacher and musician, and has served as the high school band director for 10 years. He has a number of degrees, including an honorary doctorate from Florida Memorial University, and has a lifelong commitment to education. Give our panelists a round of applause. Two-part question, and this is again honoring that the thing that matters most to me are our babies and their experiences. When each of you think about your leadership position, your role and responsibilities as educators, how do you center the experiences of students, and what matters most as we think about continuing to do this work? We'll start with you, Superintendent, and we'll work our way down.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity. This is, I think, my 8th or 9th time attending the Congressional Black Caucus, and it's always a invigorating experience. So that's a critical question, and very easy for me to answer. Everything I do, everything I think about doing, everything I fight for, has a child as the center focus of my attention and my endeavor, my energy, and my investment. And because children are central to my work, therefore those closest to them are equally central to my work. Therefore teachers and those who support them. When I talk about teachers, counselors, school psychologists, social workers, the paraprofessionals that dedicate their time, their effort, their love, their passion, their compassion on behalf of children. I thought when you were asking your question that you were going to ask, which you didn't, how does your own childhood influence the work that you do? And I think if you ask me, Carla, or Fed, probably you'll get a similar answer, because I think we come from different countries, but we come from the exact same neighborhood, if that makes sense to you. So poverty, immigration, living in despair, being the first to graduate high school in your family, having to work by the age of 15, living homeless at some point, all of that influenced who I am today, the kind of educator I am today, and I do not wish any single child in our school system or in our country to have to go through the hurdles, the obstacles, the difficulties that we did as adults when we were children. It is fundamentally our responsibility to pass the baton of quality of life, quality of education, up, not down, to the generation that follows. I think you, as teachers, are doing everything right. Unfortunately, everything that you're doing that is right is condemned by those who never once served in a classroom as wrong. It's like going to the butcher for heart surgery. You wouldn't go there, but everybody who's outside of education dares to criticize what educators do every single day. They have no idea, and they would never want to take your space for a single minute. And by the way, I think I wouldn't want them either, because they wouldn't know what to do. So I'll leave it there for now. Simply thank you so much for the work you do, whether you are a teacher in Miami-Dade County Public Schools or a teacher across America. You are the freedom fighters of our generation, and this is an important generation. It is a pivotal point in the history of our country, where we, on the basis of who we elect, could actually do incredible harm to the children we protect and teach every single day.
Brother Ingham, when you answer that question, I'm going to change it for you slightly, Ms. Hernandez. Yep, same question to you.
Well, good afternoon to everybody. And I want to thank you all for having me, sharing the stage with these young, great minds in education, and I appreciate that. It's funny because I share the stage not only with a member of the White House staff, but with a young lady who I trust with my life, and also my former teacher, who is the superintendent of schools for Miami-Dade County. So,
I taught him in high school, that is true.
and I passed.
You credit for all the good stuff.
And he was a good teacher. So I could spend hours probably talking to you about my experience, which is very similar to your experience. But I will tell you what keeps me grounded in public education is going home every day. Going home every day, I experience public education not only because I send my kids to public education, but because I have a 17-year-old son who has learning challenges, who has learning disabilities. He struggles in school, and the most that he cares really about school is about the young lady that he's gonna meet during second period, or band practice after school, or he's waiting on basketball practice in October. And I also have a 16-year-old daughter who has a 5.7 GPA, who will graduate high school on next year with an associate's of arts degree and her bachelor's degree. And her high school diploma. I have an elementary school young lady who's 10 years old who we haven't found out whether she was hatched or whether she was born. But she's the apple of my eye, and she was born in this last 10 years. And so those are the kids who have yet not been identified as Generation X or Generation Y. They are those kids who want and need and have everything right now. And so that keeps me level-headed and grounded. What further keeps me grounded in public education is those kids are minority kids. When I come home, I know that these kids have been blessed with the melanin that their father has bestowed on them. And that makes them extra special, especially in the United States of America. Because we have a country right now that has some issues with folks of minority descent. And so in as much as I believe in equality, I also believe in a word called equity. And there are those that need some attention. There are those that need the resources. There are those that need that extra 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 minutes together. But I also believe that the reason that I sit here in front of you today is because there were some people who believed that I could be more than what I was seeing. That I could believe that I could talk to folks about public education and not become a statistic in the inner city of Miami-Dade. And so if we continue to keep that level-headed, very grounded footing in public education and are steered by what we know is right, then we will change, unfortunately, what has become the politics of education. It's no longer the school of education. This is the business of education. This is the politics of education. And so we must hold true to the values that we know are right. Our politicians not only have to have the skill to do what's right, we must push them to have the will to do what's right. That is what public education is about. It is not only about treating that child in a certain way, but the classroom is shared by an adult. The classroom is a 50-50 deal. One can't be without the other, and we know that in public education. And guess what? That teacher can't do it without that paraprofessional. And that paraprofessional can't do it without the cafeteria worker. And the cafeteria worker can't do it without the custodian. And you know we can't do it without the bus drivers, because the number one concern of all parents is to bring my kid home the same way that I sent them to school. And so if we forget that this is the village that makes public education what it should be and what it ought to be to make our country better, to make our states better, to make our cities better, then we are going to continue to be on a downward spiral. I believe that we're on an upward spiral. I believe that we have seen some of the very worst of these ideologues, some of the very worst of these people who think that they're right based on business. And so as we continue this dialogue and conversation, I want you to just hold true to the values of, if you teach a kid how to read, how to do math, how how to do science, understand the aesthetic beauty in life, give them a vocation, give them a skill, and push them as hard as we possibly can academically, then we can make a difference. But also, we have to have our parent connection there. And I cannot emphasize that enough. Where we've lost it in the minority community, especially in the African American community, is the respectful fear that I had for my father. Respectful fear that I had for my father, because I would not come home after dark. And the love that I have for my mother, because I would not do something that was immoral because I knew I would let her down. And we must go back to that as a community. And we must bring that into the schoolhouse, because the school is a microcosm of the community.
So, Brother Ingham, I'm going to push you to describe how we go back to that, but I want to first enroll Sister Hernandez in this conversation. So I want to change the introductory question slightly, and if you could do two things. One, share with us why it is that you do this work. And then in the same way, what are the biggest challenges that educators face? What are the things that we need to be talking about as we consider what Brother Ingham talked about in the politics or the education or the business of education?
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're enjoying your lunch. Thank you for that question. I do this because I'm passionate about public education. So I'll share with you a little bit of my background, because I think that backgrounds help people understand who you are presently. I have a grandmother who's 95 years old, and she does not read or write because she was born in a country where women are not valued, or were not valued even more so then. And at a very young age, she was not allowed to go to school and she had to work. She was a cook at 9 years old. And she struggled. There was poverty. She had 9 children, and the cycle was perpetuating itself. But she's so brilliant without a standard degree that she knew that in order to break that cycle, she had to push her kids to get a quality education. And so my grandmother made sure that every one of her kids went to school and graduated. I am a fruit of her tree. I am product of her work. And she taught me that although she couldn't help me with my homework when I was growing up, she took care of me when I was sick. And she made sure that everything that I needed and that she could provide in terms of support, that it was given to me. And so my grandmother taught me that at a very early age, that public education was important, that it is the last equalizer, that we have to fight for women's rights, for children's rights. I mean, this is a country that didn't have even labor laws. And so that's important to me. I'm passionate about special ed. I'm passionate about students that a lot of times are taken for granted. I mean, we go to some schools and we know that these children don't have the things that they need. So we talk about equity. It was mentioned a little bit earlier. We're lacking equity in a lot of aspects. We're always pushing and striving to do better, but there's a special emphasis that needs to be put on special needs students. And I'm a product of public education. And now I have 2 little kids that I'm really proud of, that I want to go to public schools as well, that are attending public schools, and I gotta get things right for them. I have to make sure that my colleagues, that the teachers that are in those classrooms, that are giving the best that they can to every single student, that I'm fighting on their behalf so that they can give their best to my kids as well. And not just to my kids, every kid, every zip code. Doesn't matter who and where. What matters is that we're giving the best to our children. And so, I do this for them. I think that one of the things that was mentioned earlier is the rhetoric. We have rhetoric out there. We have a state governor that said he'd like to punch teachers in the face. I mean, this is what's going on. A rhetoric of unions.
Oh, some of y'all missed that memo. Y'all were teaching. That's what that was. So we're going to back up, explaining that, giving them the context for what happened, because there were some folks who were like, what? Oh, I know. Listen, go for it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So, so we have to change that. I mean, people talk about unions and like it's a bad thing. No, my working conditions are my students' learning environment. And so I advocate for students. I advocate for women's rights. And that's what this is about. This is what this movement is about. And if we look at states that have strong unions like New York and Massachusetts, and then we look at states that don't have strong unions like Louisiana, Alabama, Arkansas, I mean, we can tell that these states with strong unions have fantastic public education systems. So it can't be the unions. There's something else there. And that's all I got to say for right now.
So in August 20, a round of applause to all of our panelists. I was trying to pull up the exact quote, but in August of 2015, Chris Christie said to a teacher, "You deserve a punch in the face." This is while he was on the campaign trail running for president. We can draw all kind of parallels to he who shall not be named, but that's a whole nother panel. So there are three things that I would like for us to discuss as a group, and they are as follows. One, Fred used the word equity, and that was also the thread that ran through both Superintendent Carvalho's sentiments as well as Sister Hernandez's sentiments. So I would like for us as a group to discuss, one, how we are defining equity, and then what's required to achieve it. Right? In particular, over the last 7 years of this administration, equity at the Department of Education is a word that a lot of people use. I think we could use some help in, one, being clear about what that means to us or to you as educators who are doing this now, and then what's required for us to get there. Everybody got the first one? Say check. Check. Number two, how do we push them to do what's right? Fred talked about the work required to hold those who are elected and otherwise in positions of authority accountable. So the question is, what do we need to be doing to ensure that they get it right for all of our babies? You got the second one? Say check. And then the third one is around this village work. So we've all talked about, the panelists have referenced our backgrounds, us being fruit that has sprung from strong trees, and in particular, black folks like adages, we often talk about the village. A la raza, it's the same, right? Afro-Latinos, we show up in intersections. And so the question is, what more needs to happen to expand our ability to support the cognitive, social, and emotional development of our babies? Y'all got three? Say check. All right, so first one, equity. Second one, accountability. Third one, engagement. All right, we're just gonna open it up. I open it up first to the panelists who want to respond to each of those. Brother Frederick, I know you got some comments. We'll start here, and then I'm gonna come down here to take your comments as well.
Okay, so equity. I sat in the panel for cultural competency just for a brief moment before I walked in here, and I'm grateful that we're having these discussions and we're engaging in the difference between equity and equality. Equity does not mean equality. Equity means making sure that we offer the resources that are needed in order for people to have the same playing field. And that's what we have to do. You know, we talk about funds and things like Title I. We need those resources in order to help, those disadvantaged populations. In terms of, what was the second one?
The second one, accountability.
Accountability. You know, teachers want accountability. And I can say that, we have a concern with the amount of testing that currently exists. We know that it's gone too far too fast. We know that it is toxic. We know that it is depreciating the quality of our education, because now we are focused, now we are a test-focused society, which is not the way that it should be. And that brings a lot of concern to our colleagues, because we want our kids to be good human beings, and a test isn't gonna do that for them. You know, we wanna teach them holistically. We wanna make sure that they have all the tools and skills that they need in order to be successful in their communities. And so we believe in accountability, but we also believe that there needs to be a reform to the current accountability system. We're hoping that our states will take the things that have been implemented through Every Student Succeeds Act, and that we'll be able to change some of the policies that currently exist, because the policy that currently exists is a test-driven policy, not a student-centered policy. And so we have to change those things. And number three, what was number three?
Engagement. You are also not obligated to respond to each of them. I just want to put that out there for the purposes of discussions.
To these fine gentlemen right here.
Superintendent or Brother Ingram?
Sure. Listen, in Florida, we have an accountability system that we need to take and throw in the garbage. It's just that simple. Our accountability system pits teacher against teacher, student against student. It is a value-added model system that if educators who spend their life in education don't understand, something's wrong with the system. Something's wrong if the educators who live and breathe education cannot define the system of evaluation that they are tied to into. That is wrong. That is not setting up a system of equality or equity. It is setting up a system of revenge and competition between classroom to classroom. Education is not a competition. Education is open to everybody. We need to create a value system that gives the power back to educators, where education is about a teacher and a student and the magic that happens between that relationship. That is what education is about. It is not about labeling schools A, B, C, D, or F. When you label a school, you label a community. You label a house, you label businesses, you label everything in and surrounding that an F or D or C. That is wrong. We know what labels mean in this country, and they have never, ever been anything for positive change. They have always been for negative, blame, and shame. That's what testing is. Testing, the way that we do it here in the state of Florida, is altogether wrong. It is not right. Our kids are being not only disadvantaged, but they're being taken advantage of. It's criminal when you can identify a third grader and then you can make the beds in the jails because you've identified them out of school, not put them back in school. That's wrong.
So, Brother Ingram, what are two things, acknowledging all of the truth you're speaking, and you got some affirmation over here if you ain't got it nowhere else, and the recent work that has happened over the last year around the codification of ESSA, and then the work that some states, including Florida, have been leading outside of that. What are two things that we can focus on that the unions who are represented here should be focusing on as we think about the upcoming transition of political power, not only here in Washington, but down ticket as well? Two things that we should be focused on to make all of what you're describing real.
Sure. One, the ESSA bill is taking us a long way in the right direction. Unfortunately, in the state of Florida, some of our issues are caught in state statute and state policies, and we need to advocate for change in those state policies and those state statutes. That's the first thing. If you're going back to a state that has these very restrictive laws as it relates to public education, then you need to start to look at those policies in place. We have a bill called 736 where it is embedded that your student test scores are tied to the school grades, the evaluations of teachers, and so we need to strongly advocate that people learn more about those public policies and elect people who will support ESSA. That's the first thing. Second thing is on a local level. Listen, the very good thing about my job is I get a chance to travel from the Panhandle of Florida all the way through the Keys, and there are certain cities and certain counties that are doing things right. Miami-Dade County is one of those cities. We've got a long way to go. But I will tell you that we are making strides throughout the state of Florida to try and undo a lot of the damage that has been done from the federal to the state to the local level. And so we need to consistently be on our school board members, be on our superintendents, inclusive of the Miami-Dade County superintendent, to make sure that we push the envelope as much as we possibly can to make change, because things are not right. And if these are true educators, they will tell you that things are not right, but we can make incremental change every day. There are decisions on the local level that can help teachers and students and classrooms in each county and each state.
Awesome. Superintendent Caravallo, I want to invite you to respond, and then we have a couple of questions on the floor.
Sure, I'll take a stab at the issue of equity, accountability, and engagement. First, I wouldn't disagree with much of what's been said thus far. If you look up Google's definition of equity or Webster's, I'm sure you'll find words such as impartial fairness. Equity is actually impartial fairness about anything, about a system, about access, about opportunity. The second thing is that, as Carla suggested earlier correctly, you cannot reach equity via equal treatment. Sometimes you need unequal treatment to reach an equitable condition. If you are born with a handicap, you cannot be expected to finish the race at the same time under the same conditions as somebody who's fully able. If you are born into poverty and family disconnected conditions, you're going to arrive at school with a gap that will precede your learning gap. And all of those compounded opportunity gaps, whether they are poverty, immigration, fear of immigration, lack of parental engagement, disability, abuse, all contribute to a learning gap. And sadly, a lot of the folks who examine and speak and write about education and the folks who write legislation about education always look at something that President Ingram talked about, which is third grade, a seminal year, right? If you don't get promoted, then big things happen. And yes, in the state of Florida, and the folks who are in the for-profit prison business use that third grade proficiency level as an indicator of the number of prison beds that will be needed when these young boys and girls get to be adolescents and adults. It is reprehensible. It is not humane. It is unequal treatment under this nation's law, period. But it is allowed to stand because not enough people condemn it. Not enough people say that is an abnormality of thought. How can I accept that? So for me, equity is central to the work we do. You know, educators, I believe educators, whether you're a classroom teacher, principal, superintendent, board member, or a representative of a union, we follow a balance if we do our job right. And the balance is this. We balance out equity and access with hope and opportunity. 50% equity and access. So you have to provide equal, equitable access to high-quality programs to every kid, period. No excuses. Secondly, if you do that, you are building hope and opportunity for every single kid, period. That is how you break the cycle of poverty that Carla spoke about, the one that I lived through myself, and the one that more and more kids across America face. So equity defines the essence of ethical morality around education. If you're teaching about not being enabling of equity, you're failing. Secondly, accountability. I think most of what needs to be said has already been said. We as a country, listen to me carefully on this, we as a country shall not assess our way to excellence. We shall teach and learn our way to excellence. So, I support some degree of accountability. I support some degree of testing. And by the way, the folks who know it the best are teachers. Teachers have always tested. My God, Chris Kirshner is here. I know a lot of teachers are here. Trust me, her students used to come to me saying, my God, her tests are too tough. So teachers always assessed. I think the pushback at this point is that assessment and accountability have become abusive and punitive. Abusive in terms of the excessive use of it, sometimes with lower quality assessments. And because they are lower quality, we feel that we need more of them instead of having fewer but better assessments. How about that? It's logical, right? And then the punitive nature. It's how you use those outcomes, those results. It's how you use them, what you do with it. Do you punish children? Do you punish adults? Beyond anything that would be reasonable. And I think we have flirted with that condition in this country. Lastly, engagement. And this goes back to the point I first made. Everybody wants their kids educated, but everybody expects one single person in the world to do it, the classroom teacher. And when the child leaves the home, the child enters the school, we forget everything that has been done onto that child prior to that moment. We forget. We forget that before any achievement gap, there's an opportunity gap, and opportunity gaps that are not addressed become achievement gaps. Little Johnny can't read, Maria can't write, and those achievement gaps, if not addressed in time by the freedom fighters of our generation, become lifelong generational economic gaps. You want to finish poverty, address the opportunity gaps. Don't blame it on the teacher in the middle. So engagement is paramount. I'm going to give you a little bit of a bonus round. What will it take? You're actually seeing what it takes. Not many districts across the country dare to have a collaboration, cooperation, not meaning we agree on everything, but we agree that sometimes we shall disagree, but we shall remain in the conversation at the table because the topic is far too important. So yes, you know what? Earlier this week, 2 days ago, I was at the White House with Carla. I invited Carla to be at the White House with me to have a conversation about educational matters because she is an important partner. And you know what? Engagement. The former PTA president and Alvin Gainey, the current PTA president for Miami-Dade who's here, was there with us, Joe Jabara. When you have the parents, the teachers, the superintendent in the same house, in the same cubicle, having the same conversation about kids, about teaching, about accountability, about assessment, you get somewhere. And I have to brag. Do your research. How many of you are from Florida? Raise your hands. Oh yeah, we won this caucus. Look at the data. Look, Miami-Dade should not have a higher graduation rate than the state of Florida because we are far poorer, far more diverse. Our graduation rate outpaces wealthier districts. Our reading proficiency levels outpace the state, African American, Hispanic, non-Hispanic whites. Look at every single large urban city across America. Miami-Dade outperforms them. More magnet schools, more accolades, because there is collaboration. There is no finger pointing. There is a handshake. Sometimes the handshake hurts. But you know what? We ought to hurt for the benefit of our teachers and our kids.
Hello, my name is Grace Dolan Sandrino. I'm a 15-year-old transgender teen, and I go to Duke Ellington School of the Arts. There, I'm a theater major. And my question for you is, I know that across the country, in many schools, that there are more school resource officers than there are support staff or guidance counselors. And in some schools, there are no guidance counselors and support staff, but there are in-school resource officers. So what are you going to do, or if there is a plan to remove the in-school resource officers and use that money and put it towards support staff and guidance counselors to help our children?
So, number one, thank you for the courage that you demonstrated by standing up, showing up, speaking up, not only for who you are, but for all those that you represent. It takes courage, and I think more and more and across our country, we're seeing that, and it is a good thing. It's not part of the question you asked, but I have to tell you that in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, as the nation began to debate this issue of transgender equity and access, we started getting a lot of calls from North Carolina and from Texas, hate mail and hate calls, threatening actually my life over the fact that we were one of the first districts to say, this is the right thing to do for people like you, this is the right thing to do for all people, period. And therefore, we led in doing the right thing. That's about equity. Secondly, to your point, yes, Miami-Dade County Public Schools, we do have resource officers. Trust me, we have a lot more teachers, counselors, school psychologists, social workers than we have them. We only have about 200 police officers for the fourth largest school system in America, but we have 22,000 teachers alone. So I think the ratio is fair. But if we focus our attention on consequence rather than prevention, if we do not teach values and create environments where people feel respected and understand what kids bring to the schoolhouse, rather than addressing those consequences, understand who kids are and treat them in respectful, dignified ways. And I think that's exactly what we're attempting to do in Miami-Dade. In fact, second year in a row where we launched this Values Matter campaign, which has taken off like wildfire. In fact, the very first thing, as I arrived here, people wanted to take pictures with their Values Matter poster. That's important. The other thing, which you did not touch on, but it's critically important, to the extent we continue to early on criminalize minor infractions done by children. And I have to tell you, if I had gone through school at this time, if I was a kid today, I would not be superintendent, I'd be in jail. Because I was a truant kid. Often I didn't show up because I felt I had the inappropriate clothing, or I smelled, didn't go to school. But I did well, so I passed. But I got into fights. I was not an exemplary child. I made it. One of the things we did in Miami-Dade is we eliminated outdoor suspensions. Now, some bumps along the road, I recognize, because we created success centers with school psychologists to provide the support for kids. But in one single year, 40% reduction in juvenile arrests in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. In one single year, the number of referrals for disciplinary action done by teachers went down 80%. So something happens. So I agree with you. Rather than enforcement, we ought to establish a balance between prevention, intervention, early identification, rather than simple remediation through law enforcement and create scarlet letters on kids' foreheads that last a lifetime.
And I just want to give a little different of an angle, perspective to that question. You were focusing specifically on resource officers, and so there's something that we have to address in terms of our county. We have had a very high rate of gun violence in certain zip codes. And so it's important for us to see the other side of the school resource officer too. We're not having these problems in our school. Our children are safe when they're with us. They're safe in the classrooms, but we are losing our children to gun violence when they step out of the classroom. And so, this is a much larger conversation that we need to have. How do we engage the community? How do we get other alliances with other organizations to really help us solve that problem? Because it's a problem. We have too many of our babies, as you would say, dying. We're going to funerals. We're seeing this on the news on a weekly, almost daily basis, and we're being desensitized to this. Now it's becoming normal. But the point is that we keep our children safe in school, but there's a problem once the bell rings and they're out in the community.
Definitely. So my name is Monet, and I'm an 18-year-old. I serve through a service program in the Washington, D.C. area in Anacostia. And to the engagement piece, one of the main concerns that we had when we were talking in the other panel was engagement with students. So my question is, what are some successes that you've had on your school boards and in your counties with student engagement, as in like student representatives on the board, or bringing students to board meetings, making them accessible so that students can understand the processes that are creating their classrooms?
So there are 9 elected board members in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. At a board meeting, a superintendent sits up there, school board attorney, 9 elected board members, and a student representative. So that student representative, and by the way, this year we have a young man named Sebastian. He asks more questions than all of the school board members combined. So Sebastian may not graduate, actually. I'm kidding. He is fantastic. He's bright. He's inquisitive. He brings the voice. He actually has town hall meetings with his colleagues in high schools to understand the issues, and then he always says, I'm bringing the student's voice, the student's perspective. So that's one. Two, a number of years back, we started student forums, mainly at senior high schools. And if you're from Miami-Dade and you're a senior high school teacher, we bring senior high school students, and I actually interact directly with them. I do it about 5, 6, 7 times a year, different parts of the county, and I bring about 40 students at a time. And boy, did they hit me hard with everything and anything. So I get firsthand a student's perspective. Lastly, there are 2 more vehicles. Certainly we have end of year climate surveys where students are very vocal about what they like, don't like, what they fear, don't fear, how we let them down or how we elevated them. But the most important single element of communication directly to me that informs our work in schools today is social media. The day that we stop telling kids, turn off your phone, leave your phone at home, BYO, bring your own device and turn it on. Remember the days when we used to fear one single reporter with a camera outside of school to cover a story? Now we have 2,000 reporters in the school covering everything, from a dirty toilet to the measly burger in a cafeteria line to everything and anything. And first we feared it because we were getting tagged with negative stuff that students were telling us. Today, before I took off for Miami, I had 6 students, you can go on my Twitter feed and look at it, saying, hey, there's a problem at Braddock Senior High School. The air conditioning's not working. How do you expect me to learn when it's so hot? I said, honey, I got you, working on it. I have a system that immediately sends that information to folks in the mechanics department. Within 2 hours, the AC was fixed. So students' voices become important. So it's coming at us. You cannot ignore a child's voice, a student's voice, any more than you can ignore a teacher's voice or a parent's voice. It's this continuum of honest information that really improves the performance of a system.
Good afternoon. I am a teacher in Miami-Dade County, and in an earlier session, the young lady that started off the conversation about the counselors and the resource officers, and I asked this, I said, there's so many times that there is an allocation of monies and it's slated for a particular reason, and that particular reason means that that money is only used for that. And I want to know, how can we get money slated for more counselors in the schools to assist the children with the problems that they're coming with from the community? Problems such as broken homes, divorces, father killing mother, all kinds of things. I think if we have more counselors in the schools, most of our counselors a lot of times are tied up with scheduling and other things. But right now, today, we know with gun violence on the rampage, we need to have our children counseled more. Yes, I love the core values that we have in Miami-Dade County, but I would love to see the counselors be able to put small groups of children into a session and help them to understand what those values mean while I'm still teaching math and science in the classroom. So I want to know, how can we do this? How can we manage it? And I know we've been hit by some budget cuts, big time, but now it's becoming a critical need on behalf of our children who are out there doing all kinds of things because they don't understand their lives. So tell us, how can we get more counselors in the school to assist the children with these sessions to adjust to what's going on in their lives? Because that is imperative. And infuse those core values that we're beginning to work with in Miami-Dade County and spread them abroad.
I know the question is for Carlin Fed, right? Well, number one, I agree with you, Petrina. It's kind of cool when you come to a place you actually know people's names. I agree with you. Number one, the state. So how do you get it? Well, if you lift Florida per pupil spending as a function of individual wealth in a state from 50th of 50 states, at least to the average. Secondly, let's stop lying to people about what the lottery revenues are used for, because 15 years ago, 20 years ago, a huge portion of the Florida lottery revenues were used to pay for counselors. And then the state came up with a number of other ideas. Number one, Bright Futures. Bright Futures sounded like a great idea. It is a great idea until they changed the criteria recently, shutting out Hispanics and blacks from the program by dramatically increasing the criteria for acceptance. So it's not even means test. You can be rich but still get Bright Futures, while a poor kid doesn't get it. So and let me tell you what else replaced it, and you're really gonna love this. As I said, 15, 20 years ago, lottery money was used for Bright Futures, was used for counselors. We actually got a categorical allocation specific to counselors. But then they introduced the concept of school recognition money that accompanied A, B, C schools that moved up a grade. And you saw all of the money that used to be spent from the lottery on counselors being completely used by school recognition dollars and Bright Future scholarships. Huge mistake. So how do you do it? Two ways. Increase the per pupil funding at least. Look, don't take us to number one. Just take us to the middle. $7,000 a year per kid in Florida, anywhere between $12,000 to $21,000 in New York and Massachusetts. All right? 7 to 11 to 21,000. Take us to the middle and reformulate how discretionary dollars, such as lottery, are being used. The good news, last year, despite the economic difficulties, we added 60 additional counselors in Miami-Dade. This year, under this year's budget, we added an additional 24 counselors. But it's still insufficient. When you're looking at a ratio of 1 to 500 kids, now it may work in Palmetto, Pinecrest, but it doesn't work in the areas, the 20 zip codes that Tangela Sears, by the way, I have my sister here, Tangela Sears. I have my mom here. Raise your hand, Mom. Yeah. One of the first people I met at Jackson Senior.
That's
When you talk
impossible, by the way, because she's my mom too. That's impossible. That's impossible. Okay, sorry.
Well,
I digress.
don't you know that we look alike?
That's a whole nother panel. Listen, Linda. So I just want to manage expectations, and let me do a quick check because we're supposed to wrap this in 10 minutes, but I know this is really important. I have one over here. I have one over here. Who else needs to say something? Otherwise, they're going to have bad things to say about me on Twitter. So 1, 2, 3, 4. See, no other hands. We got 4. We're going to get in, get out. 5. I got you 4. 5. All right, so we're going to start here. And I'm going to ask both the 6. I got it, Linda. I'm just saying. That's going to be the last one. I'm going to ask both the question and the comment to be brief. 7. Last one. I asked y'all to raise your hand. See? And when y'all students do this, y'all be mad. 1. Come on, stand up. I'm going to hold the mic because studies show when you hold the mic, you talk longer.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon. My name is Danielle Taylor, and I am a counselor. I'm an adult vocational counselor now at Miami Lakes Educational Center and Technical College. So my question is, I am now / a recruiter, and what I do is I go out and promote most of our programs, and especially our Toyota T10 program for students that want to be auto technicians within the Lexus and Toyota companies. But what I see there is a need for more of these programs in the vocational and technical colleges to be to get out to the high school students, for those students that do not have the options and are not going to a 4-year university.
What's the question?
How do we do this?
All right, before you respond, here's another question.
Well, my point is very similar to her. I have 3 kids, and all 3 are very different. I have my youngest that's at Sunset in the magnet program. I have Brian that's in Carver, and he went after Sunset. And I have Anthony, which is quite my challenge. Anthony is more or less like you, superintendent, that doesn't like school. I have to push him. I have to constantly be on him, threatening him, and the teachers know me on a first name basis. And Anthony, I finally got him into George T. Baker last year, and it has been a blessing. But like she says, not everybody was meant to for books and for, and to study and to go to the university. And we need to make sure that we address all the kids and their different learning styles and what they need. I think we need more schools like George T. Baker for kids like Anthony. That does not mean that they are not smart. Simply, they do not like to open that book, and they learn much differently than Brian does in the magnet program.
So to one panelist, how do we account for supporting the learning and development of students who are not to take traditionally expected pathways? How do we ensure that we better connect traditional conversations about education to necessary workforce development? Take both of those at once, please. Of course.
So I'd like to say that we have to have these dialogues. We have to have this conversation about how we change what we feel is a traditional public school. In Miami-Dade County, we're fortunate, and I'm going to give a shout out to American Federation of Teachers. We have a grant. We have a grant, and we've been working in conjunction with, obviously, Miami-Dade County Public Schools, American Federation of Teachers. It's called the Innovation Grant, and we're working out of 3 high schools. And in these 3 high schools, what we're talking about is a career technical education. How do we have those pathways in the high school implemented, embedded already, so that when they graduate from high school, they already have a pathway to success? And so we're doing that. The union, AFT, we're working with our students. We're impacting over 250 of those students currently right now. But those are the things that we need to talk about. As a special ed teacher, I know that that's important, because not every one of my students is gonna go to college, but every one of my students can be successful. So how do we give them that pathway so that they do that?
Awesome. 2 more questions.
Okay, my name is Elizabeth Taylor Martinez. I'm a counselor at Miami Springs Middle. I am a 7th grade counselor. I get students who are turned off to school. And when I look back in their history, I see that they were retained in 3rd grade because they did not pass the FCAT, because that's what it was then. Their grades could have been outstanding, really good, or mediocre, but it was enough to pass, and yet they were retained. The following year, they passed the FCAT reading, got a level 3, and they moved on. But their grades starting in 3rd grade, 2nd time, were horrible, and it continues, and by the time I get them in 7th grade, they don't want to do this. They have very negative outlook on school. We need to find a different way to help these children besides retaining them and labeling them at what, 7, 8 years old as a failure? Help.
Before you respond, Brother Ingram.
I teach kindergarten at a 40-40.
You better teach the babies.
At a 40-40 school, so we're one of the 40 lowest performing schools in the area, and I think we're focused on, closing the achievement gap, but my question is, how do we promote equity and make sure that other gaps aren't widening, like the play gap, developmentally appropriate gaps, I'm probably making that up, social emotional development, how do we make sure that's not getting worse as we close the achievement?
Perfect questions.
So I'm going to have a very short answer to a lot of the different questions that have been asked. We got to vote. Listen, and I know it sounds so out there, but we can sit and have this educational conversation all you like. You guys are smart, we're smart, we can come up with answers all we want. But if we have people in place who won't put in policies that make sense for kids and communities and families and black folks, we got a problem. We got a problem. You have to get out and vote. And everybody has to center their attention around who's in office and who should be out of office. Because if they go after your job, you most certainly should go after theirs. This is, it is so unfortunate that we sit in these conferences all the time and nobody gets to the real deal. There's some people who do not need to be public servants because they don't serve the public at all. At zero, and they never have, and they never will, and then we sit around and watch people not vote, and they vote against their self-interest in many instances. You can't do that. We can't do that. That's why we have a collective ideal of this thing called union, so that we can get this information out and get people activated to do what's right. You have to push these people to do what's right. You have to exact change. You can't ask for change. We can't sit around and create this in a room. These people must be pushed to a level that they will do something about it, and if they won't, get their butts out of office. That's what we need to do as a union. That's what we need to do as teachers and as educational support professionals.
Awesome. We got 3 more. We're on Landis Plant.
This question is somewhat directed for Mr. Superintendent. We know we talk about a school to prison pipeline and how suspension had kind of led to that. And one of the biggest factors with many of the kids that we have issues with in our school system right now are those kids that were retained in the 3rd grade and are overage kids, especially at Brownsville Middle School at age 16, some of them turning 17 here in December. How can we really go about providing them the social services and the technical training? Because many of these kids, as they were talking about having it at high school, Brownsville at one school at one point had those programs. You're bringing back the arts and those things, but we need to bring back vocation. Some of these kids are not book smart, but if we can teach them, like there's a gentleman that graduated from Miami Northwestern, owns his own landscaping business. Not landscaping, lawnmower servicing business. He learned how to do that stuff by one of our current teachers at Brownsville at the middle school and continued it in high school.
What more can or should we be doing in that respect?
Well, I think you asked a number of things there, but number one, we as a country have done a terrific job at demonizing the value of career technical education. We lied to our kids when we said everybody's going to go to college, when a lot of them really had no interest in going to college. So if you have no interest in going to college, if you really want to do something with your hands instead, and by the way, with your hands these days, we're not just talking about being a mechanic, a plumber, an electrician. You can be a computer coder. You can be a high-level apprentice in a technical program. But if the child doesn't want to go to college, but everything that kid hears is that everybody's going to go to college, automatically going to think of themselves as a failure. Yep. Secondly, our country works in a pendulum swing, right? Everybody's going to go to college. So all of the funding, the incentives, the academic recognition and standing of a school system or a school were on the basis of performance in math and reading, nothing else. Not music, so therefore music started being cut, not art started being cut, not foreign language started being cut, not career technical programs that began being cut. Why? Because you only value that which is tested and publicized. It's insane. Second point, crazy, right, that a 17-year-old would still be in middle school. But that is the reality of many schools. That's why we have done 2 things. Number one, and you probably know this to be true, yes, we've brought back the arts and music programs, existentially important in the lives of kids. We just reaffirmed our commitment to the social affective needs of children, of recess. We have diminished homework requirements for kids, but brought back not only arts, music, foreign language programs, but we continue to bring back at a very rapid clip career technical programs, whether they are magnet or choice. So aquaponics at Northwestern Senior High School, trade and logistics at Central Senior High School. Those are just two examples of those types of programs. Second thing we're doing, we're aligning those programs at senior high school with their programs in middle school. You cannot just have kids going to the high school without an understanding of what the world of work is, at least experience at some level in educational programs. We're doing that. And thirdly, specific to the needs of those children who were retained early on and today are lingering, even though they are of high school age, but they are lingering middle school. We introduced success centers, but not the success centers as opposed to suspension. The middle school success centers, where we try to catch up these kids more than 1 year in terms of aptitude during one single year of instruction. The way we do it is we interview the very best teachers that not only have the skill, but something that Fed said earlier, not only the skill, but the will to teach those kids. You may be the brightest person in the world, but if you have no passion, compassion, understanding for the trials, tribulations of this child, you're not going to connect. And I think those are the three things we're doing to really catapult those kids into a successful reality.
I have a statement and a question. I'll be very brief. You know, I was just inspired by what you just said over there. I forget your name, the brother on the end, Freddie. But you know what? When you look at all these people in this room, we're always talking about strategies for pipeline, strategies for this, strategies for that. We need to actually look at what the reality is. There is a design, a master plan in the United States of America that is directed at the disaffiliation, the lack of opportunities historically for people of color. It is systemically based. Until we challenge that system and call it out and not skirt around it and create program. The issue is there are people in this country that are deigned to and designed to not succeed. And we must crack that barrier. Now, I know it's very broad to ask, what do you think we need to do about that? But I'm going to just put that out there. That may come from another time, but we can't ignore that root cause of why our children don't have access to opportunity.
So I'll say something really quick. We are trying to address it in Florida, and since he's the vice president of the Florida Education Association, I can tell you that he has made a yeoman's job in really addressing it at different counties. We're talking about institutional racism. We're having those conversations because not enough people talk about it. And so a lot of people aren't even aware, and they want to brush it under the rug like it doesn't even exist. So we're bringing that topic up to the forefront. But within that conversation, we're also talking about getting out to vote. You know, and being solid with what's right for public education. We can't have people out there that are making policies for us that know nothing about what it takes to do it.
So can I just add one thing? Okay, so just top to bottom, I think we need to start to teach our kids about social justice from inception, because they need to understand that there is something out there, that there is something against them. They can't use it as a crutch, they can't use it as a blockade not to succeed, but they need to understand it and be empowered and then learn how to deal with it. They need to learn not to blow each other's brains out because they don't have hope and opportunity. That is what's happening in our community, because when you lack counselors, when you lack love, when you lack hope, when you lack opportunity, then you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of learning. Survival. It will turn a good person bad. And that is what's happening. When a kid can't eat, they will take your food. When a kid can't live, they will go in your house. When a kid can't drive, they will take your car. That's what's happening right now to our kids. We have to start to teach our kids a little bit younger than we have been and get them back to the historical aspect of who they are, whose they are, and why we can go forward.
Hi, Erica Jones, United Teachers Los Angeles. And I just kind of want to go back to what our young sister in the back was saying about the resource officers over the counselors, because, you know, in LA, we come from a place where the budget priorities are school policing over counselors, specifically in our Black and brown communities, specifically. And when you have a movement for Black lives that has put out an extensive platform, really hitting that system and really unapologetically saying, the public school system was never meant for us. And it's time that we actually really, it's not about changing it, it's about recreating it, right? So where do we fit in as unionists, as educators? Two things. One, how do we then support the movement for Black lives? But then also, how do we make sure Black lives matter in education? So it's not only supporting the movement for Black lives as educators and standing up, but then how do we bring that back and make sure that within our own school system, everything we do within our power possible to make sure Black lives matter in schools?
You want to talk about in school? So I just talk about it in generic sense. I want to talk about it in school system sense. How do we make sure Black lives matter? Make sure that the life you're living matters, because you're Black and your life should matter. And I'm Black and my life should matter. And my son is Black and his life should matter. And because, listen, we've got to get back to this thing to where we stop ostracizing people because they speak up. You know, when people speak up, man, that's what this country's built on. The Boston Tea Party is why we have a country. People spoke up. They look different, but they spoke up, and that's who we're built on. So you can't demonize people because they're sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, and those people were sick and tired of those people being sick and tired. Listen, this thing is about all of us, and this thing is about, everything matters to us, and we have to start with the key, education. But we've got to educate in the right way. We've got to be better parents to our kids. That's where Black lives first start to matter. We've got to teach them that they are somebody. We've got to make sure they have food on the table. We've got to make sure that we're teaching them character education and moral education. And yes, sir, and yes, ma'am is okay. And please and thank you is okay. And learn where fork and spoon go on a table. That's what my parents taught me. And my daddy also taught me that if you came in this house when I told you not to come in this house, it was gonna be me and you. There was no violence on the street. It's gonna be violence in my house. Now, I don't advocate violence. I don't advocate corporal punishment, but I do advocate being a dad to your son and your daughter. I do advocate being a mom with that unfettered love for your child that says, I will do anything for you. But as soon as you cut up in Publix, it's gonna be me and it's gonna be you. That's what we need to get back to. So Black lives matter. All of our lives matter. Our babies, my kids are my most, that is why I breathe every day. That's why I breathe. But the scariest thing that I do is send my kid off to school or somewhere else that I can't watch him, because my son look like anybody else. He wear a hoodie, he wears pants down where I don't like it. He like to rap. He have these bigger headphones on, and he looks like any other kid, but that's my heartbeat, man. That boy is everything that I exist for today. And if that's your heartbeat, and we are killing these kids are being murdered on the street. These kids are being slaughtered on the street. And if that does not wake somebody up, be you in the school or out of the school, policies that are set up are criminalizing people of color for no reason except for the color of your skin. And that is unfortunate. And so we just got to get back to this thing, because I want my kid to be around. I do. I don't want my kid, I don't want to have to bury my son. I could not imagine what Tangela Sears is going through. I could not imagine that. I don't want to bury my kids. That's not the way that it should be. It should be in a way that we understand that these kids' lives matter. So Black lives do matter. And anybody that tells you it doesn't, then they need to go somewhere else too. Thank you.
Powerful closing sentiment and a powerful question. Want to remind everybody that this is not the end of our conversation, but a pause so that we can transition. And I would really encourage everybody to think about the two questions that our sister posited. How do we ensure that Black lives matter? And how do we ensure that Black and brown and other marginalized lives matter in our classrooms, our schools, and our communities? Carla started by saying, I've got to get this right for them, referring to her babies. And all of us collectively have to get this right for all of our babies. So I encourage you all to continue this dialogue, not only in person, but on Twitter. Please use the hashtag CBCFALC16. Encourage you also to transition to your last and final workshop. So this should be the one that you have not yet attended. We will then conclude for our final gathering after that session back in this room. We'll meet here and then conclude for the day. Any questions about the agenda, you can see myself, Kim, Latoya, who are sitting at this table, but encourage you to start your last session. Everybody give yourselves a round of applause.